Everybody, welcome to our webinar this morning. We're starting at 9 with the CEN webinar about the Annex Z, giving you some drafting guidance and best practices. My name is Else and I will be moderating the webinar in the background as usual. So you're all muted. We expect a lot of people to connect, so we keep you muted during the presentations, but you can use the Q&A panel to submit your questions during the presentations. So please use it, and the speakers will have a look at your questions during the presentations and will reply as many questions as possible. Afterwards, we make a Q&A report available so you can check the answers to your questions should these be unreplied during the presentation today. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor right away to Daan and Francisco. They are HAS consultants working at Ernst & Young. So please go ahead. Or no, apologies, Frederic. I see you appearing, so I guess it's you first taking the floor. So please take over. I'll stop the presentation and then you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Els. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Frédéric Blanao, the account manager at CENELEC of the Harmonized Standards compliance team. The goal today of the webinar today is dedicated to the Annex Z. That is a critical component, and it's the primary reason for non-compliance. So we thought that it was very useful to organize this webinar together with EY. The webinar will give you information that will help you hopefully improve the drafting of the Annex Z. Dan and Paco from EY will start and will do the main chunk of the webinar. They will explain you, they will give you some information about EY, about how to contact the HAS consultant, and most importantly, about the issues and how to address the main issues of the Annex Z. Then Mauro from CEN and CENELEC will take the floor to share some important links and show where to find the Annex Z templates on the CEN website. At the end of the webinar, there will be a Q&A session to close the webinar. And voilà. And by the way, about the Q&A, something I want to make clear from the beginning. Be aware that questions related to the ongoing court case will not be addressed as well. If you have very specific questions that are sectorial specific or TC specific, I invite you to contact your CCMC project manager to raise them. We will address questions that are really related to the content of the webinar this morning. So I will now leave the floor to Dan and Paco, and I hope you will have a very good webinar. Thank you again for being with us this morning, and see you. Bye.
Thank you, Frédéric, for the introduction. I hope you can all hear me and can also see the screen. So thank you very much for joining us today. So my name is Daan BIJWAARD. I'm the project manager on this project on the side of EY. I'm joined here today with my colleagues Tim and Hanna, both here in the room. So together we are responsible for the operational implementation of the Harmonized Standards Consultants project at EY, which we carry out for, as you know, for the European Commission with DG GROW in the lead. So it's great to see that so many of you are attending here today. And also, of course, also thank you to CCMC for providing us with this opportunity to engage with you. Many of you will, of course, or all of you, I expect, would, of course, know the HAS system. May have had meetings with HAS consultants, but yeah, the opportunities for direct contact between our team and you are, of course, more limited. USTCs are more limited, so we are happy to address that. We know that the HAS system is very important to your work and also affects your daily work in the technical committee. So that we would like to use this opportunity to give some more details about its working and to be able to answer some of your questions directly. One important element I forgot actually to mention is that we are joined, of course, also today with Francisco VERDERA, sorry, most known as Paco. I never use his full name. You already noticed that. So Paco, he leads our QR team, quality assurance team. So he looks at the quality of the work delivered by HAS consultants before we send it back to the ISOs. And today he will give let's say the technical part of the presentation, which will take up most of the time today. So you see here the agenda we'd like to discuss. So this is what I'm now doing as part of the introduction. Then we will give a brief update, an operational update on the assessment work, so on the progress with the assessment work and the speed of the assessment work managed by our support team. Subsequently, we will give some general best practices for technical committees. So this relates to meeting requests, for example. And then we will come to the main part. So that's the good practices on drafting Annex Z to make sure that the draft standards are compliant and ultimately, of course, can be cited in the official journal. So this will take up most of the time today. I think we have 3 hours overall. We have reserved substantial time at the end for questions and answers, and because we know from experience with this kind of meetings that there will be quite a large number of questions, which is great because we can use this opportunity to answer as many of them as possible. Probably we won't be able to cover all questions, but we will report them. So you can also the written questions, if any are input in the chat box, we will record them and we will create a short report afterwards, which will be shared with the participants later on. Here you see again the team overview, which I just mentioned. So here today, I'm Daan, and I'm here today joined by Tim and Hannah, and Francisco. He will join over the phone. I hope that he's already arrived because he was flying this morning. He is indeed a vital part of this presentation. To give a little bit of background to explain, to reiterate what the HAS project is about. So at the high level, the HAS system aims to contribute to the clarity, quality, and consistency, and also the coherence of harmonized standards developed by the ISOs in reply to a Commission request for standardization. So in doing so, we execute Article 10 of the Regulation on European Standardization in 2012. So this defines, among others, that the Commission may request ISOs to develop a European standard or European standardization deliverable, and that the Commission, together with the ISOs, shall assess the compliance of the document drafted by the ISOs with this initial request. And so there we come in, so we can move to the next slide. So what does that mean in practice? So we would like to underline here that HAS project is a service, or should be seen as a service to you and to the European Commission, aimed at increasing the compliance of harmonized standards, and so ultimately leading to a higher citation rate of harmonized standards in the official journal. So this was actually achieved also during the formal contract. So the citation rate increased, and that we hope to bring about also under the current contract. By ensuring that typical compliance concerns are identified in our reports, which you can then use to reduce non-compliance. We also provide targeted training and support to HAS consultants and the European standardization organizations, so including the meeting we have here today. We also have regular contact with the desk officers at the European Commission, and hence also support the Commission in its efforts to reduce the number of non-cited harmonized standards. And a key operational focus for us is to ensure that the HAS consultants, when they carry out their work, they can focus on actually carrying out the assessment. So we deliver them, of course, all the documents, ensure that they have meetings when requested by you, etc. All with the aim of delivering good quality assessment reports and and increasing the compliance of candidate harmonized standards. So that's the project really in a nutshell, very briefly. And now my colleagues will give an update on where we are with the project in terms of number of performed assessments by sector.
So currently, as of today, we have completed 1,732 assessment requests. And as you can see here in this graph, the majority of assessment work is actually being done for the machinery, LVD and noise sectors. These are the busiest, and we receive the highest number of requests in these. What this figure also shows is that most of the assessment requests that we received have been completed. There is a number that still are in process, which means that they're either with the HAS consultants or being reviewed by the quality review team. And finally, on this graph, there are very few items in the pipeline, but overall, there are no items waiting to be assigned to HAS consultants for a long time. So then we can move to the next one. Yes. So this graph shows you a bit about the timeliness of the assessment work that has been completed in the HAS project. As you can see at the beginning or earlier stages of the project, the timeliness was not very close to 35 days that we always try to do. We also had some longer delays, but as this graph shows, from after January 2024, this trend has been reversed significantly. So we currently see that we are completing over 70% of assessment requests within 35 days. And also the very long delays that were sometimes present with HAS assessments have been eliminated. The current situation still has some delays, as you can see, but these are mainly caused by two reasons. So firstly, we sometimes receive very large batches of assessment work all at the same time. This makes that we have to assign it potentially to the same HAS consultant, and therefore deadlines are set further in the future. And then the second reason is that we also always try to ensure consistency between assessments. So that means that if a draft standard has been previously assessed by one HAS consultant, we try to assign subsequent assessment request also to the same HAS consultant. But that might mean that, for example, one HAS consultant gets 5 assessment requests at the same time, and therefore deadlines are set for the future. It's a continuing effort from our side to be as on time as possible with these assessments, but due to the two reasons mentioned before, there will remain some delays, but for very good reasons. I think we can move to the next one. And the final thing I would like to share is the current situation in terms of non-compliance. So what we see is that the further we go in the development of the standards of the later assessment stages, the compliance rate goes up. So this shows that there is a positive result. There's also the feedback of HAS consultants is implemented most of the times, and this leads to more compliant documents. However, as you can see as well, is that for the last confirmatory assessment, there is still 55% of requests that are not compliant. So there is clearly also still room for improvement. And then the next part that we wanted to discuss is some general good practices for the HAS system.
Yes, so I can take over here. So first, we wanted to remind you what you all probably know when you request the assessment, what can be expected. So as you all know, first we have the 4 stages on which you can request the assessment. Is the committee draft of the first working draft, inquiry, formal vote, and if that one is negative, you can also request one additional assessment on the last conformity stage. And what you can expect from HAS consultant is to perform verification assessments, to provide you with the assessment report, which is work in support but not representation of the Commission. So therefore, the Commission considers the assessment but is not bound by the result. And that's important to highlight here. Has consultants also convey the Commission's position to the CEN or CENELEC or other organizations or technical bodies. And has consultants are also not allowed to modify their reports or assess revised documents during the meetings with the TC, and they do not contribute to the standard process. So they can only provide you with assessment, but they cannot take part into drafting of the standard. So saying that, we can pass to the next slide, which is a small reminder about the meeting requests. So again, this can only happen after the assessment is completed, because of the reason that the HAS consultant cannot take part in the development of the standard. The meeting request should be requested 4 weeks prior to the meeting date to allow consultants, first of all, us to pass the message to the consultants, which is usually done within 1 week since you submit the request. And for the consultants to save the date in their calendars, as they also have some other engagements. The full agenda of the meeting should be provided when you fill in the meeting request form. And again, the meetings can only be linked to previous assessments, so the ones that are already completed and for which you received the assessment report. Physical meetings can be so possible, but are subject to the approval by the HAS consultant, and the HAS consultant must agree to cover their own costs to attend the physical meeting. Therefore, we always prefer that the online option is provided and that consultants can join you virtually. And please also remember to use the proper link that was provided, I believe, last this year in March, so that we receive your request. In case we do not respond to your request within 1 week, please always feel free to send us a message to make sure that we received your request properly. And yes, then small summary again, what consultants can do is to convey the Commission's position and to participate in the meeting to offer clarification for the comments or the questions you may have to the comments. But they cannot contribute to the development of the standard, offer guidance to the TCs on how to make the standard compliant. They can only perform assessments on documents received from the TC or assessed directly. And they cannot modify completed assessment reports. The new request has to be submitted for the new report. And also, they cannot be contacted directly and cannot participate in the meetings without the approval from our side. So that's all for the meeting requests. Then we wanted to share some numbers of the Annex Z non-compliance, which goes solely to the topic of our today's seminar. So from our data, we analyzed the reports which we received, the new template that you are all familiar with, I believe. And it comes out that common criteria connected to the Annex Z are the most often found to be not fulfilled. So they are most often the reason for non-compliance. The criteria on Annex Z, which properly relates to relevant legal requirements of EU legislation, to the clauses or subclauses of the document, is the most common of all not fulfilled criteria. And 1 to 17 on the test assessment methods that are reproducible and appropriate is the second most often found to be not fulfilled, which shows why it's important to also have this seminar today and to clarify how to properly draft Annex Z. We can also pass to the next slide, which shows how the non-compliance of the criteria changes per stage of the assessment. And when we see that usually at the publication stage, so the last stage, it's the numbers are going lower. Still, for example, the LCA stage, there is quite high share of non-compliance. For example, for the first criterion, 1 to 22, with 17%. So we would aim to lower this number and to make sure that it will not be a reason for non-compliance anymore in the future. So that's all from our side. I don't know if we have Paco with us.
Sorry, I jump in. So I propose we switch to the part related to the main links and how to find the information on the
That would be
website.
that would be great. That would be great, really. Thank you so much, Frederick.
Okay, I will do that. So we will take the screen and Mauro will present you some useful links and as well where to find the information related to the Annex Z. I will leave the floor to Mauro.
Thank you, Frederick. So as Frederick told, I'm going to provide the
Share screen.
yeah. I will share my screen and I will provide a small live demo about where to find the guidance documents materials for the Annex Z drafting. So I have a small presentation that I'm going to share. Yeah, this presentation will be shared with you at the end of the webinar, and here you can find a link, a specific link to the CEN page, as well the link for the previous webinar on Harmonized Standards, where it was given an overview about the development process for the European Harmonized Standards. So by clicking on this link, you can easily access our CEN. It is easily accessible in the Google if you just click or type CEN. You cannot see. 1 second. I have to switch the page. 1 second. Yeah. So yeah. So by clicking on the link that is provided in the presentation, you will access this web page of the CEN. As well, if you go just type in Google CEN, you will be able to access the CEN page. And here in the reference material on the top right corner, you can as well access other page that will provide you the forms and templates pages for guidance documents for the Annex Z. Here you can see the generic template for and access the general template for the Annex Z or sectorial specific like batteries, constructions, machinery, super important, and yeah, every type of documentation and as well some guidance and instructions specific for each sector or for generic sectors. Sorry. On top of that, you can find as well here in the guidance documents, documents related with the drafting process for the listing of normative references, specifically for the normative reference in the Harmonized Standards, the rules that rule the system for listing normative reference in Harmonized Standards, and yeah. So in this CEN page, you can find everything that is linked both to normative reference and most important for this webinar, to the Annex Z templates and guidance documents. And that's it.
Paco, are you ready to take over the floor?
I don't see Paco connected anymore. I don't know what happened.
So while Paco is connecting, maybe we can have already check some questions in the Q&A. So I see a question from Colin Pinkey about why not PED sector Annex Z template. I would say this is up to the sector. It's a decision per sector. Some sectors are using the generic template. some need a more sector-specific template like machinery, and it's up to the sector together with the European Commission desk officer to decide if a sector-specific Annex Z template is needed. Dan, maybe you can jump in because there's one question for you from Jan Blackmere.
Why would the HAS consultant not be allowed to provide info with the compliance report on what is missing or what has to be done to make the standard compliant with the request? So yeah, HAS consultants, I have, of course, detail in the report what they think is missing, but the key is that they are not allowed to, let's say, perform a consultant work together with the technical committee to develop the standard. That's to ensure the impartiality in the system. So that's the reasoning behind how it functions. I don't know if the commission is in the chat as well, would like to add on that. Another one here, in previous webinars, and Jong showed an overview of the compliance per sector. This is definitely something we can provide. So if there is a desire for you to receive this, then we can share this with CEMC, with Frederick and his team. We can forward it to you. So we have this information. We didn't include it specifically today because we have invited many different DCs and it will become a quite long list. We have indeed shown it earlier when we had sessions dedicated to one or two specific sectors, for example, which is not the case today. Today, it's a bit broader and showing the overall overview, but we are fully aware that it will be interesting for you to have the overview also at sectorial level, so we can share that. The only caveat I would say is that there are, of course, some sectors and where there is a low number of requests, others we have a very high number of requests. So this varies a lot. Where there is a low number of requests, the figure should have, of course, be interpreted with some care because one of the assessments outcomes can make a very big difference there. I think Paco has joined. I hope you can hear us, Paco.
Yes, I only need 1 second to plug the computer. So if you can give me 1 second, I will just start soon. Sorry for this.
Yeah, we are not showing anything yet. There was a question on that, and there's another question on Annex Z template. That's maybe something for Frederick also.
Questions is, as Frederick told, a specific question, and this must be aligned with the technical PMs to update the templates for each specific sector. And we know at this case, like for example, for machinery, that the machinery regulation is now in force. So, but still the mandate is not yet published. So until there, the machinery regulation template of the Annex Z-A is based on the machinery directive, and it's like accepted horizontal by us and the Commission. So in the meantime, it's a transition period, and we hope when the mandate is already published that every template is updated and corrected if there is any error on it. But you can always report these type of errors or mistakes to the technical PM in charge of the TC to highlight these type of errors. Yes.
Are you ready to start, Paco?
Do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we can start. I'm just at the same time multitasking to get plugged, but it's we can start. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for giving me the floor now, and we are going to explain the Annex for CEN, the Annex Z-A. So we have prepared just a list of recommendations, do's and don'ts, okay? So it's going to be something that we are going to enter into several details of things that should be done or things that should be avoided. Okay, so we can move to the next slide if you want. Okay, this is just to introduce the concept of when we are referring to an Annex Z-A. Of course, you know very well what is an Annex Z-A, but I think it is important to highlight why the Annex Z-A is critical for a harmonized standard. Okay, so the Annex Z-A brings the list of essential requirements that are, and this is an important element, we are referring to essential requirements, okay, mainly. We are going to link the essential requirements which are contained in the directive or the regulation with the specific sections of the standard. And okay, the Annex Z-A as such is an informative annex. Okay, so this means that to comply with the standard, okay, you don't need really to comply with the Annex Z-A. You could use the standard for your own purposes, and taking into consideration that as a standardization issue, the Annex Z-A as such is, let's say, informative. It's not, let's say, normative. You don't need really to comply with the Annex Z-A to comply with the standard. This is an important clarification. Then you may say, okay, if it's informative, then why we are doing all of this? Well, yes, it is informative, but the standard as such, we know it has an interaction with the legal frame. Okay, in this case, the legal frame is the new legislative framework directive or regulation. It could be the machinery directive, it could be the pressure equipment directive, it could be any of the different pieces of legislation for which you are drafting harmonized standards. In that sense, the Annex Z-A has a particular, let's say, a particularity, is that the Annex Z-A gives a clear information on which are the different essential requirements and how these essential requirements have been covered by the standard, and in which clauses or subclauses of the standard we are covering requirements or even assessment methods to support the application of the essential requirements of the directive. So this is a first message I would like to set up, and now you can see that I'm more, let's say, more paused in my presentation, because now I already solved all the connections, things that I was, so apologies for my initial start like this. I hope you can hear me well. Dan, if you can raise your finger, then your thumb, that's fine. Okay, so then this means thank you. So it is clear that from the perspective of the regulatory perspective, a harmonized standard gives legal effect. But it gives legal effect if the standard is cited in the official journal, and if it's cited in the official journal without any restriction that could limit the application of this presumption of conformity. So this means, and this slide, I'm taking my time just to explain this concept, because some people may say, okay, it's informative, why are we doing so much to just, why are we paying so much attention to this annex? In reality, this is an essential annex to give information to the user of the standards on which are the clauses or subclauses of the standard that you have to apply to comply with the different essential requirements. This is an important element. Of course, standards are voluntary in 99.99% of the of the new approach directive or new legislative framework directives or regulations. The standards are voluntary. So this means these are one of the means, the preferred means, one of the means to comply with the essential requirements in the legislation. The manufacturers could choose other ways of complying with the essential requirements, but then they don't gain the presumption of conformity. So therefore, it is essential that we give in this Annex Z the information regarding the link, a clear link between the essential requirements and the clauses and subclauses of the standard. Let's go to the next slide. As a consequence, if we are saying that the essential requirements, there is a table called Annex, in this case in CEN, we call it Annex Z-A1, is a table linking the different essential requirements with the clauses, subclauses of the standard. Normally, these sections or subsections should contain requirements or requirements and test methods. The fact that this is the case means that we should not refer in the Annex Z to clauses or subclauses that do not contain requirements or do not contain requirements and or test methods. And we will clarify this because we have a particular slide for these test methods to address the test methods. So if in this case the scope of a standard does not contain requirements, therefore the Annex Z should not refer to the scope of a standard. And I know some of the technical committees do that. They are referring to the section 1, which is normally a scope. Okay, we should avoid this because this could mean that the Annex Z is not correct, because it would be giving a wrong information to the user of the standard. In addition, there is another element that we have to take into consideration when drafting the Annex Z. And also when you are drafting the standard has a title, okay? Then you have a scope, which includes information on what is included and what is not included in the standard, what is covered and what is not covered in the standard. This is the scope. If we would have a situation where the title of the standard gives you the impression that a particular type of products are covered, and then when you read it in the scope, this is not the case. So for example, you have a general title and then you see the scope that is very narrow. For example, you are covering engines, which could consider that you have let's say an electrical engine or a combustion engine, and then in the scope you exclude, for example, the combustion engines, but the title says only engines. Then there is, let's say, a mismatch between the scope and the title of the standard. And normally this mismatch is because at a certain moment or at a certain period of the drafting of the standard, the technical committee may have decided to narrow down the scope of the standard. But then we find, and I tell you, these are examples that we have seen in our daily lives. Not many, fortunately, but this is an example. So there should be really consistency between the title of the standard, the scope, and the Annex Z1. So it doesn't make sense that if the standard is not covering the combustion engines, and then you are drafting an Annex Z covering the noise of combustion engines. This would be a mismatch between the title, the scope, and the Annex Z. I hope with this example, I'm clarifying what we mean here. Also, we should, so in reality, the requirement is very clear. We should avoid any product or aspect in the scope that is not covered by the title of the standard or the Annex ZA. So there should be really coherence between these three elements. And this is a recommendation, what I'm going to say. I mean, we know, because we have seen it in several standards, that there are in the scope recommendations on whether the product can be used or only or not by professional or trained staff. This kind of conditions, the scope, frankly speaking, is not a place to place this. I know this is a seminar about Annex ZA, but just to tell you that this may create really problems when even delays when approving or when assessing the standard. So my recommendation, or our recommendation here, would be to avoid any reference in the scope as much as possible on whether the product can be used only by professional or trained staff. And because then this would open again a discussion that could possibly delay the let's say the assessment of the standard. Let's go to the next slide. We were saying that the Annex ZA is, in particular, the table ZA1 is the table linking the essential requirements with sections or subsections. And I all the time I'm repeating sections of subsections. I know it can be annoying, but this is just to let you know that, of course, granularity in the way we link the essential requirements with the parts, the relevant parts of the standard that are addressing these essential requirements is essential, is fundamental. We may have the essential requirements on the left. They are just there represented. So it could be essential requirement 1.3, 2.3, 2.7, 3.7. And then we have several sections of the standard that do not have any relation with the essential requirements. This is what we are going to refer to as non-harmonized part of the standard. So this means when you see in this table, in this slide here, two boxes which are orange with a red cross, this means that subsection 3.7, for example, J.Y of the draft standard has no relation, not at all, with the essential requirements. This is what this would be a subsection called that could be, we could refer to it as non-harmonized. But then the following section, for example, the 3.7 or 3.8 of the draft standard is giving a requirement that help us to implement the essential requirement 4.7, for example. This gray box would be what we call a harmonized part of the standard, okay? So what it is really mandatory is that the orange box and the gray box are not in the same part. Okay? So when I say part, I use the word part with all the meaning. This means you cannot have in the same subclause or in the same clause if you don't have subclauses. So this means you have to separate the part that is harmonized with the part that is non-harmonized. Okay, how do you do it? Well, maybe just putting a number 3.2. So let's think that the section is section 3. You put 3.2. This is the harmonized part, and then 3.1 is the non-harmonized part. So then when we refer to it in the Annex ZA, then it's very clear which subsection we are referring to when we are addressing the essential requirement 4.7, for example. So this is mandatory. So to separate the harmonized and the non-harmonized part is mandatory. So this is something that if you want your standard to have a good assessment, it has to be very clear which part is harmonized and which part is not harmonized. And that's why we are drafting the Annex ZA, in fact, to identify which parts are harmonized and non-harmonized. So this means which parts are really addressing the essential requirements. But after what I said that is mandatory, we have a recommendation. I mean, it is sufficient that the harmonized and non-harmonized parts are clearly identified and separated. And normally, a good way to separate it is to have it, if you want to have them in the same clause, then you have two different subclauses, okay? And of course, it is, if you place them in different clauses, even better. But we know that some standards, they have already a fixed structure. So we are not going to claim, or we are not going to force any technical committee to separate into clauses when there is, for example, a long list of parts, part 1, part 2, part 3, that have a predefined, let's say, series of sections. So clauses, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In this case, if you want to address something that is harmonized inside section 3 and the rest is non-harmonized, please create a separation like 3.2.3, something like that, something that can really be identified in the Annex Z. If you do this, then we are giving sufficient granularity to identify which parts are harmonized and which parts are non-harmonized. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Here the important thing is the Annex Z. Sorry, this is a mistake. Annex Z should say here. The Annex Z is sufficiently detailed in describing which clauses or subclauses support relevant EU legislation. So there should be no ambiguity on identifying that which parts are supporting the essential requirements. In addition, the Annex Z should be granular enough, so it should give us the possibility to identify really which parts can help us supporting a risk assessment of the product or mitigation in case there could be any acceptable risk as defined in the regulation, in the corresponding regulation, and how to mitigate this risk in a precise manner. And again, this is just a reminder, the Annex Z shall not refer to the scope of the standard, as the scope does not contain requirements. Okay, this is just a reminder, it's in red. But here the important thing is that granularity is critical when we are drafting the Annex Z. Let's go to the next slide. So to have an Annex Z that is properly designed, again, we should have a clear identification of which clauses or subclauses of the standard reply to which legal requirements. But here it's not even legal requirements, it's to which essential requirements are covered. Therefore, as we are referring to essential requirements, an essential requirement cannot be addressed by an informative part of a standard. We referred before to the scope, okay? But imagine that we have a paragraph, which means a section or a subsection, only with testing methods. Only with testing methods. Well, this means that this section or subsection would not contain requirements. In this case, we shall not make reference to this paragraph. And there is one exception to this case, and we are going to see it a little bit later, okay? But in principle, all the sections or subsections that are addressed or that are, let's say, referred to in the Annex Z should contain at least requirements. Another critical element, and we will clarify this, because I know that this is, we have several cases of technical committees that are making reference or referring to other standards, or even to other parts of the same standard, of the same series of a standard in the Annex Z. And I was saying another element that we should take into consideration is that Annex Z is not the place to make reference or to refer to other standards. If you want to refer to other standards, and the technical committees normally say, yes, but this is for transparency. We want to be transparent. Yes, but an informative annex like Annex Z is really not the place to do this. The right place to refer to other standards in the context of harmonization, this means in support of the application of the essential requirements, are the sections or subsections that you are listing in the Annex Z. but not in the Annex ZA itself. And I know we are going to have discussions about this, but let me re-emphasize the message. If you want to make reference to another standard, Annex ZA is not the place to do it. You have to do it in the harmonized parts of the standard. And a particular example of this is the part ones of the standards. We know that in series of standards, part one is considered somehow to be, let's say, the general requirements or the requirements that apply to any type of product within the family of products, etc. But according to the CENELEC internal regulations, part one of a standard has to be considered as a normative reference. And if it's a normative reference, this means it's a different standard. So here, this is a plea to the technical committees. Please try to avoid no, please no. I mean, if you want to have a non-compliant assessment, of course you can do whatever you want, but I would strongly recommend you that because it's one of the critical things when assessing the Annex ZA shall not refer to another standard, including part one of the same series of standards. And once said that, I must say that, okay, in the case of the machinery directive or regulation, where we have part A, type B, and type C standards, further analysis is needed. So this strong requirement that I have placed on you, I can tell you that for the time being, the only case that we could be considering as an exception, but still we have to discuss internally what to do with this, is in the case of type A, type B, and type C. But in the other cases, again, part one is another standard, and therefore we should, like in the case of the other standards, not refer to it in the Annex ZA. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. And well, more on the same topic on drafting the Annex ZA in a precise way and giving the sufficient information. In some sectors, you are starting now to receive standardization requests that include the requirement to list all the applicable and non-applicable essential requirements. So this means if you have let's say the list of the directive or the regulation, some standardization requests are now including the requirement to list all the essential requirements. So first of all, my recommendation, this is still a recommendation, but as you can see in the parentheses, but soon to become a general rule, what I would strongly recommend you is that you list all the essential requirements in the Annex ZA. And then, of course, you check the standardization request just in case. If it's mandatory to list all the essential requirements, then it's mandatory. You have to do it to comply with the mandate or with the standardization request. But if this is not really a requirement in the standardization request, and we consider that having an Annex ZA where the majority of the essential requirements are not applicable, to have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages in blank saying requirement 3.2 not applicable, 3.3 not applicable, 3.4 not applicable. The added value of this, of course, is not very high. So I would recommend you also just a way of so if around 80% of the essential requirements will be around, I don't want you. So if it's 79, no, I mean this is just a recommendation, an overall figure we are giving to you as a guide. If you see that the real majority are not applicable, then only list those that are applicable, because otherwise you are just filling 20 pages of 5 pages, 7 pages, 8 pages with non-applicable. And this is also introducing noise to the user of the standard. So it's really annoying to the user of the standard because he has to find what is applicable, which is sometimes not convenient. Okay, so I hope that you understand what I mean. If it's not a requirement in the standardization request, please consider what to do, and here you have a guideline on whether you should include it or not. But this is a recommendation. But what it is mandatory is that for each essential requirement, you have to indicate if it's covered. If it's covered, then you have to indicate in which section. So this means you don't need to put covered. You put section 3.7 of the standard, 3.8 of the standard. So essential requirement 2.3, 3.7, 2.4, 3.8. You have to indicate in which sections or subsections the essential requirement is covered. If the essential requirement is partially covered, or if it's not covered, you also have to indicate it. And so if for any reason, imagine that the scope of the standard makes very clear that you are only covering one particular aspect of the essential requirements, then of course you give this information in the Annex Z. What does it mean that in practical terms? That if you want to gain presumption of conformity and the requirement is applicable, you may have to find another harmonized standard to cover that aspect that is not covered or is partially covered by the standard. Okay, and of course, if the essential requirement is not applicable, I remember Federico Musso giving an example. So you are drafting wooden toys. So if there is an essential requirement on electrical safety for toys, obviously, if the wooden toy has no electrical components, it is not applicable because it's a wooden toy. It doesn't have any electric circuit. Okay, let's move on. And Dan, feel free to shout in case you see that I'm taking too much time in my explanations and that we are running out of time. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, assessment methods or tests. And I was explaining to you before, the Annex Z should be covered by harmonized parts, so sections or subsections containing requirements. Okay, so what happens if the Annex Z is addressing or is referring to a section or subsection that only contains test methods? What do you think? It's possible or is not possible? Well, as what I was telling you is that the essential requirements have to be covered by parts addressing, let's say, the requirements or tests. So I will change the sentence. Forget what I said now. We have essential requirement, whatever. It refers to a paragraph, a section or a subsection that contains requirements. That's fine, because the requirements help you applying the essential requirement. But if we have a paragraph that is only a test method, in general, this is not acceptable. The only way that we could refer to a paragraph that or section or subsection that only contains a test method or an assessment method is, and this is the exception, if the essential requirement itself refers to test methods or assessment methods. Okay, and we will see an example of this. So this means that the assessment methods and test methods have to be indicated in the harmonized section, normally accompanying other requirements, to demonstrate compliance with the relevant essential requirements. So this means they can be in the same section of the requirement of the harmonized part, or in other sections of the draft standard, or via normative references to another standard. So we could have essential requirement 3.3 referring to a section that contains only requirements, but then also referring to a section that contains the test methods. Okay, so in the Annex Z, we are referring to two subsections, which contains one, the requirements, and the other one, the assessment methods. That's fine. That's fine because the assessment methods are needed and they are appropriate to test if the requirement is complying with the essential requirement. But what we cannot do is to refer to, in the Annex ZA, to a paragraph or section, subsection, that only contains test methods, because then we are not giving the requirement to implement the essential requirement. And as I told you again, there is an exception. Yes, unless the essential requirement refers to the assessment or test methods. And we are going to see an example in the next slide, okay? So examples of this nature, of having harmonized standards, having test methods that are referred to in essential requirements, we find them in the machinery sector. For example, we will show you a particular example of the machinery regulation, or for example, in the regulation for explosives, where you have to test, let's say, somehow the explosive once it's constructed to see if it's safe and if it's corresponding to the standard. So, I'm sorry for what I said, because I'm not an expert in explosives, so maybe the technical committee on explosives may say, Paco, you have no idea, please shut up. But in this case, what I want to say is that the essential requirement for explosives, there is an essential requirement on assessment of the explosives once they are built. Okay, so recommendation, taking into account that the assessment methods or test methods may apply to both harmonized or non-harmonized sections of the standard, because we may have a test method that serves you to assess if the requirement, if the essential requirement is met, but this same test method could be used for other non-harmonized parts of the standard. My recommendation would be, or our recommendation would be, that it could be a good practice that both harmonized and non-harmonized sections of the standard refer to the same section or subsection containing the applicable test methods. Okay, so this means we don't have to duplicate the test method in the standard, but we have the test method in a third paragraph or section, subsection, and then both the harmonized and non-harmonized section refer to this section or subsection. Let's go to the example, next slide. Thank you, Dan. This is an example for machineries that are used to provide pesticides. I think there is another let's say, I think it's to, drift of pesticide. So to prevent the drifting of the pesticide. So this means there are machinery to apply pesticides in the fields, in the agricultural fields. And there is an essential requirement in the new machinery. Well, here, of course, if we are addressing machinery's essential health and safety requirement, 2453 tests. Okay, so we have an essential requirement referring to tests, which says, in order to verify that the relevant parts of the machinery comply with the requirements set out in the sections 24151 and 2452, the manufacturer or her authorized representative must, for each type of machinery concerned, perform appropriate tests or have such tests performed. Okay, so it is interesting that the essential requirement itself is requiring the tests. And this is an example, is the EN 17744, agricultural and forestry machinery, environmental requirements for dusters. In this case, the Annex ZA refers to the clause of Part 5 concerning test methods. And our first reaction was, no, this is not acceptable because this paragraph only contains test methods. But then, of course, we checked in the, this was an indication from the HAS consultant that told us, look, but there is an essential requirement to prevent the drift of the pesticide to the environment. So this means that in this case, it is an essential requirement. So making in this case, or referring in this case to the paragraph, section, subsection that only content tests, then is correct. Because what we said is the Annex Z links the essential requirements with sections and subsections, which help us implement or apply the essential requirements in the practical life. So I hope this example is clear enough. Let's go to the next slide. In any case, I'm sure we will discuss about this. Right? Then we have some examples. In this case, it's an example for the personal protective equipment regulation. The Annex Z refers to a section or subsection covering a particular essential requirement. That's fine, because okay, we have a harmonized part. But in this case, there is a section which contains requirements. So fine, this complies with my previous slide. But there is no appropriate or reproducible tests in the section or subsection. And there is no even reference to such test in another paragraph, which means section or subsection of the standard, or there is not even a reference, a normative reference to another standard containing the test method. So in this case, we are giving a requirement which supports the essential requirement, but we have no assessment method to verify if we comply or not with it. In this case, we are not complying with the requirement that all the essential requirements, all the normative parts, sorry, not normative, all the harmonized parts of the standard should have an assessment method, which is appropriate and which is reproducible. And by the way, we know also that in many directives, we are having issues by the fact that not only we give one assessment method or one test, some standards, some harmonized standards give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different alternative assessment methods. I would strongly recommend you not to give alternative tests or assessment methods, because we all know that it's practically impossible that two alternative assessment methods give green light or red light to different products. So this means we could have a case where test A says, yes, we comply with the essential requirement, and then test B says, no, we don't comply with the essential requirement. So my strong plea to you is, if you really need, for any reason, to give several assessment methods or test methods, please always give one to be the reference test method or assessment method. But even a stronger plea from my side, try to avoid this situation, because if you give this situation, it is most likely that you will complicate the compliance assessment of the standard. So again, I know I'm giving you too many strong recommendations, but this is based on the experience of two HAS projects where we have been assessing thousands of standards. So really, doing these kind of things only complicate really the process of assessing and approving the standard. So this is a strong plea from my side, and I know that this may also create issues. Well, we also find here in this example that some sections that cover a particular essential requirement are not referred to in the Annex Z. Then this will lead also to a lack of compliance, because of course it's a lack of compliance that can be solved easily, just amending the Annex Z. But please, if you have several essential requirements that are covered by different parts of the standard, please identify all these sections and subsections in a clear way in the Annex Z. And in addition, in this example, we had some sections, also subsections that were referred to in the Annex Z, but in reality, they had no relation with the essential requirement at all. Well, this is, of course, another reason for a lack of compliance. So I would strongly recommend that, please, when you refer to a particular section or subsection, be completely sure that it has a direct or indirect relation with the application of the essential requirement. Let's go to the next slide. That's going to be also possibly a part of the discussions we may have later on. This is a must. This is a requirement. Please do not refer to other requirements than to the essential requirements in Annex Z. So this means the directives or regulations under the new legislative framework sometimes contain additional requirements in the text of the directive or the regulation. But we know that there is a particular place in the regulation or the directive where we have identified we find the essential requirements. Please, the Annex Z only has to address the essential requirements, not other requirements that may be contained in the Annex Z or Annex Z. That may be contained in the essential requirements. The main reason is because it is doubtful that other requirements provide legal effect. This means the presumption of conformity. As a consequence, it is better not to, well, in fact, it's not that it is better, they shall not be referred to in the Annex Z. And this means that you should not refer to those sections or subsections addressing other requirements that are not the essential requirements, not directly. So this means not mentioning directly the section or subsection, or even indirectly, which could mean that we are addressing another section. So we are addressing the Annex Z is pointing out, it's referring to a section. This section does not contain any requirement for the other requirements, but then you include a reference in this section pointing out another section that addresses this other legal requirement. So in principle, what you are doing here is through the second reference, you are making you are making indirect reference through the Annex Z to this other section. So please, when you are drafting the standard and when you are drafting the Annex Z, make sure that you are not indicating, you are not pointing out, you are not referring to any, let's say, requirement that is not the list of the essential requirements in the directive or the regulation. Let's go to the next one. And I'm sure we will discuss about this. We have another example under the Personal Protective Equipment Regulation. So in this case, draft standard supporting the personal protection equipment. The draft standard should be clear if the essential requirement is not fully covered. And we have here an example of a comment from a consultant that was assessing a particular standard, saying, remark that footwear tested, well, so then it's clearly the harmonized standard for protection for footwear, protective footwear, tested according to this standard, offer limited protection against cut by free rotated saw chain unpowered. So this means that the remark that this standard is not protecting against the cut by a rotated saw chain is missing in the remarks in the column, in the third column in the Annex Z. So what does it mean? This means that we are not giving the information to the user of the standard, which may be the manufacturer, and then the manufacturer is producing his or her product based on the harmonized standard. They go to this section, which is pointed out in the Annex Z, and you believe that because you see that the essential requirement 3.3 in this case is the essential requirement 3.3 is covered by section 2.7. I don't know, 2.7 of the standard. When in reality it is not. Okay, so then you should say that in this case you should indicate partially covered. Okay, or not covered. Because this means that you are not giving a particular protection for this essential requirement. So Annex Z is an informative annex. So please do not include requirements in Annex Z. This is also something that we find sometimes. Some technical committees include, let's say, in the section where they are linking the part of the standard, a requirement. And in addition, you should indicate which clauses or subclauses cover the essential requirement and if they are partially covered or totally covered, or not covered at all, or not applicable. Remember, we had a presentation on this slide on this some minutes ago. Additionally, requirements to be included as a reference in a section or subsection. Yes, Federico, you wanted to say something or you just have connected? No, I think it was that Federico was connected, sorry. So additional requirements to be included as a reference in a section or subsection of the draft standard that is referred to in the Annex Z, so this means it's the harmonized part, should be, instead of duplicating the requirement, we should do, let's say, the reference to the standard, but not in the Annex Z. Remember, Annex Z is not a place to refer to other standards. What you have to do is to refer to the section or subsection that is covering that essential requirement, and then this paragraph, section or subsection, yes, can refer to the third standard. In this case, the ISO 20345-2021 plus Amendment 1. Okay, so this means, again, this is a reminder, the Annex Z is not a place to make reference or to refer to other standards. Let's go to the next slide. So this is a recap. This is, we have given you too many instructions, too many recommendations. We are aware of that, but frankly speaking, believe me, in our experience in the HAS project, if you decide really to go on your way and not to follow these recommendations, it may lead really to a complication in the smoothness of the process, because our objective, your objective, and the objective of CEN and CENELEC Management Center, and the objective of the HAS project is to support you, we are not supporting you in the drafting, but we are supporting you, giving you recommendations, good practices on how to draft harmonized standards that may have, let's say, an easier, a better citation rate in the official journal. So this means, please follow these recommendations, because we believe really this can help you in drafting standards that are going to be most likely to be cited in the official journal. Even if it's, you know, that the decision of citing a standard in the official journal does not depend on the HAS consultants. In fact, we are supporting the European Commission in this sense, but the European Commission is not bound by the decisions of the HAS consultants. And this is an important point. But here are our recommendations. Before drafting the Annex Z, and this is an essential element, the TC should have identified the risks of the product or aspects to be covered by the standard. What do we mean here? How can you draft a harmonized, an Annex Z, which is linking the essential requirements with the different parts of the standard, if you do not know which are the risks and which are the aspects that help you implementing the requirements? So this means that before drafting an Annex Z, of course, you have to consider the nature of the product and the different risks and different aspects that are relevant to comply with the legislation, in particular the essential requirements, because I told you that Annex Z should only link essential requirements with sections or subsections of the standard. The Annex Z, moreover, should also clearly indicate if the risks are covered, partially covered, or not covered. As a consequence, the user of the standard will know if provided that the standard is cited in the official journal, and provided that there are no restrictions in the citation of this standard, then the user of the standard may know that may gain presumption of conformity according to the aspects that are covered by the standard. Okay, so as you can see, this is very important because the manufacturers really, there's a lot of money behind having presumption of conformity or not. So this is not something that we are saying just because we want to annoy you. No. This is because we want that the standards really support presumption of conformity, which we know it has clear economic benefits for the manufacturers and other users of the standards. Third recommendation, or sorry, here I say recommendations, but in reality it's recommendations when you are drafting the standard, of course. You can do whatever you want. Do not mix under the same section or subsection harmonized and non-harmonized parts. So this means we need to provide sufficient granularity in the Annex Z. So then the user of the standard knows which parts really are replying to an essential requirement and which parts are not replying to an essential requirement. And the same applies for mixing under the same section or subsection requirements from different pieces of legislation, if not sufficient granularity is given. What does it mean that? This doesn't mean that you cannot have in a section a part replying to, for example, a machinery directive, and then another subsection inside the same section replying to ATEX directive, for example, if we have a machine that is operating in a potentially explosive atmosphere. Okay, yes, you may have it, but give then the sufficient granularity, so then the user of the standard will know, this subsection corresponds to the machinery, this subsection corresponds to the ATEX. Okay. Please do not refer in Annex Z to legal requirements that are not essential requirements. Again, please do not refer to that, because Annex Z links essential requirements with sections or subsections of the standard. Do not refer to other standards or parts of the standards in Annex Z, including Part 1. And again, exception, the type A, type B, type C could be an exception. We still don't know. We have still to discuss about it. But for the time being, please try to prevent any reference to any other standard or any part of the standard, the series of a standard in the Annex Z. If you want to make reference in the text of the standard, but not in the Annex Z, please. This will only complicate the compliance assessment. Refer, and in this case, then the following bullet says, refer to sections or subsections that refer to these standards. And that's fine. Then it's fine. Do not refer to sections or subsections containing informative parts alone or parts without requirements. And again, if you are addressing a paragraph that has assessment methods because there is an essential requirement, you are replying to an essential requirement, and that's fine. But if there is no essential requirement dealing with assessment methods or test methods, please refrain of referring to a section or subsection that only contains test methods or assessment methods. So normally the section or subsection should contain the requirement, and then if you want, you can also add in this section or subsection reference to the test method. That's fine. But only to the test method, please do not do it. And refer to sections or subsections containing requirements or requirements and test methods. Good. So this is my part of the presentation, our part of the presentation. I hope that, and again, I have to apologize for the little chaotic start of the presentation due to the fact that I was not finding the right, I was having issues with connectivity, but I hope this presentation was clear enough. In any case, we will see that during the questions and answers. So I'm relaxed in that sense. So Dan, the floor is back to you, and thank you so much for giving me the floor.
Thank you very much, Paco, for this very detailed and I hope very useful presentation. Maybe before we move to the question and answers, which is the next agenda point, unless CCMC wanted to raise another point in between.
I was going to say that probably it's better to proceed to the next point. Yes, on the agenda.
That's fine, but maybe it's good if we have, let's say, a 5-minute coffee break before we move on to the questions and answers.
I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay, very good. Let's say we see each other back at 35, so in 8 minutes.
Sure.
Thank you all. Beautiful slide. Thank you very much all for joining again. And so we've quite a bit of time left. Actually, we booked till 12, if I'm right. But let's see how much time we need to answer your questions. So this can be both operational questions relating, of course, to what we explained at the beginning, but also on the practices regarding drafting Annex Z-A. So please put your questions in the chat box. We will go over them. If it's still unclear, you can raise your hand. But given the overall number of participants, there are more than 200 people participating, which is great, of course. But we have over 200 people participating, so I would prefer if you put your questions in the chat box first and not start talking, because that with such a large group, that's always difficult to manage. So let's start with the first item from Savio Del Bianco. So is it mandatory to indicate whether the item to be harmonized fully meets the essential safety requirements? I think that's one for
I'm trying to unmute myself. I see Federico is here as well, so he may intervene in any moment if we say something that needs clarification. So it is mandatory to indicate whether the item to be harmonized fully meets the essential requirements. Yes, I mean, it's not necessarily the section or subsection or clause or subclause. There is another comment about, please refer to clause or subclause. Well, in reality, it could be a paragraph. So that's why we are saying sections or subsections, not to be confused with a clause, which is clause 3, for example. But okay, call it as you wish, as long as we have the relevant granularity. So Dan, I see you are responding in direct. I don't know what does it mean, this.
I don't know. I usually also don't use Zoom, but this means that we have addressed it and then it becomes under the answer box, but we are still addressing it now. So please just continue.
So the essential requirements that are covered by the standard, it is mandatory to indicate whether they are fully addressed or not. Yes, definitely. I mean, if we are drafting an Annex Z where we are saying paragraph 1 to 3, or paragraphs 3 and 6 and 7, or sections 6 and 7 and 8 are, or clause 8 in this case, is addressing this essential requirement. This means that the user of the standard understands that these particular sections that are referred to in the Annex Z, they are covering this essential requirement. If they are not fully covering this should be indicated to the user of the standard. Otherwise, he or she will claim presumption of conformity if the standard is cited in the official journal without any restriction. And as a consequence, this means that he would be claiming or she would be claiming presumption of conformity when in reality the standard does not provide full presumption of conformity with the essential requirement. Therefore, it is mandatory. This is my interpretation, unless the Commission says the contrary, which of course has the last word on this, not me. So if you want, we can go.
I think we can consider this one answered. The one on the sections and subsections already addressed as well, Paco, unless you think something else needs to be added there.
No, I think not, and I hope that my explanation was clear enough. Okay, Dominique Rosen, the CEN consultant's recommendation some time ago. Well, if you are referring to a CEN consultant, it must be long time ago, because yes, now they are called the HAS consultants. So this means the previous period where when the what we call the NAC consultants, the new approach consultants, were managed by CEN and CENELEC. The CEN consultants' recommendation some time ago was to separate the document into two parts: part one harmonized, part two non-harmonized. So have the rules evolved since this recommendation? Is it safe to put the two parts together in the same document, respecting the rules given in this webinar without risking rejection by the consultant? That's an excellent question, Dominic. Frankly speaking, of course, we are giving recommendations that are general recommendations to avoid. So it's like do's and don'ts to avoid problems. In principle, I would tend to answer yes, but of course, I don't know exactly the case. And of course, it may. I hope that these general guides rules are not leading your specific case to a lack of compliance. So, what I would do possibly is to contact your colleagues in CCMC, in CEN and CENELEC Management Center, which are dealing with the Harmonized Standards unit, and have some checks with them. I can tell you that, okay, without interfering in the drafting of the standards, there are coordination meetings, regular coordination meetings between CEN and CENELEC Management Center and the Commission, and even with the unit dealing with the HAS consultants. So in principle, if you have a clear granularity separating the harmonized and the non-harmonized part, I think it would be safe. It shall be safe to put all the two parts back together, if you believe that there is an added value in having the two parts together. Of course, if you had citation, if the standards were cited, part one was cited, of course, part two was not cited because it's non-harmonized. But if your part one was cited, and continuing with your model of part one, part two, the risk, maybe it's lower, then continue like this. But frankly speaking, as long as you give granularity and the user of the standard is very clear which part supports the essential requirements, in my opinion, there should be no problem. So the answer is yes, I think so. So if you follow these recommendations and there is sufficient granularity and it is very clear which parts of the standard refer to which or give practical application requirements to comply with the essential requirements, my answer is yes. Unless the Commission again says something against what I said. And I must confess, maybe we are dealing with a standard that is under the construction products regulation, where we don't have essential requirements, we have essential characteristics, and the standards have more a nature of assessment methods. Okay, in this case, we might be in a situation that would deserve further consideration. Okay, but in principle, my answer is yes. Okay, so let's go to the next question.
Did you answer the one on the pure test method already, Paco?
Sorry, which one? The test method?
So does this mean that the pure test method standard cannot be harmonized?
Well, this is a very interesting case, because in fact we know that test method standards are harmonized. Okay, so there are some directives that are where we have test methods, assessment methods. I must confess that for this one, I would prefer to really make a further assessment of the situation and give you an answer. But yeah, does it mean that the pure test method cannot be harmonized? There is a strong discussion on this. Yes, Mauro, you wanted to say something? It was Mauro. I heard someone talking, but maybe it was.
No. From my part, it's okay. You can proceed.
Yeah. Okay. So in principle, I would say that give us some time to discuss, and we will give you in writing this answer. But we currently know that some test method standards are cited in the official journal. Depending on the directive, if they are needed. Let me give you one example. Yes, now I will give you the example. Imagine that there is another standard containing requirements. And then you have a standard on test methods that it is purely test methods, but it contains also additional elements. And this standard is referred to in this requirements standard. We know that this has been cited in the official journal. The only thing that we are giving today is that apart from these special cases that, yes, we need further consideration, and we will give you an answer in writing for this. In principle, if you have a standard that contains both requirements and test methods, and the standard is according to the scope and the title, it is not indicating that it's assessment methods, because that's another element to be considered. So this means someone that may use the standard may consider or may expect to find requirements and test methods inside the standard. This is a different case to the one you are referring. So Maximilian, give me some time to discuss, and we will give you an answer on this. Is that fine, Dan, that we can give an answer later on?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, very good. So, because in fact, that's a very good question, because in reality, this what you say is true. So there are some assessment methods, standards that are cited in the official journal. As a guess, yes, the EU Artificial Intelligence Act will be supported by 10 standards, and many of these will only cover 1 or 2 requirements. Hence, the list is not covered. That the list of not covered will be very long.
Paco, we lost your sound. We don't hear you anymore. I think these are mainly HAS consultants. They appear as our team members' names, so you will probably see this when you have joined. But what your name is, so you have joined as Tim Postema or Hanna Volkovic. These are our team members' names. For those people, it might be good if you can include your name in your comment, because then we can see who actually made the comment. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. Well, the question regarding the Artificial Intelligence Act will be supported by 10 standards, and many of them will only cover 1 or 2 requirements. So the list will be very long. Yes, here we have to check the standardization request. I'm not sure that the standardization request is still approved. I know that there was a draft, but maybe now it's approved. Mauro, maybe you can confirm. But the thing is the following. If the standardization request does not contain, and again, how many essential requirements do you have in the Artificial Intelligence Act? Then if it's a long list of requirements, again, they have to be essential requirements. Then if you see that the majority, 80%, let's say, this is the figure I just put to give just a reference. If you see that the majority are not applicable, then if it's not required by the standardization request to list all the essential requirements, then you could list only those that are relevant. This is my answer, and I think this makes sense. Because in fact, I told you also during the presentation that for the user of the standard would be annoying if we have 10 pages of non-applicable, and then you have one that says applicable. The user of the standard may be misled by all so much noise, and then only just the 2 of the sections applicable. Yes, please check your standardization request to see if this is a requirement. And also, I'm not quite sure if the and we have to be careful not to confuse the requirements with the essential requirements in this case. So we should really check if there is a list of essential requirements in the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, which I read 3 months ago. So I must confess, I don't give you the answer because I don't know it. But as a guess, you say it will be supported by 10 standards, and then they will cover only or 2 requirements. If this is the case, and there is a long list of essential requirements that will not be covered, and then the standardization request does not require to list all the essential requirements, then you can do whatever you want. The important thing is that the user of the standard gets the right information. So, in my opinion, in any case, we will give you in writing the answers, but we will check all these things. Manufacturers, Niels.
I see that Federico has his hand raised.
Thank you, Federico. You want to clarify or even say, Paco, you are wrong. Very good. I like it.
No, I absolutely not. I'm sorry I cannot start my video apparently. But in any case, I hope you can all hear me well. No, just a couple of integration. Yes, the artificial intelligence standardization request was adopted in May 2023, but it was adopted back then. There was no legislation yet. So basically, it was adopted with a request for normal European standards, not harmonized standards. At this point, of course, there is no reference to essential requirements, etc., because the legislation was not yet in place. However, as soon as the legislation is adopted, the process will start to amend the standardization request. At that point, the wording will be consistent with other standardization requests for harmonized standards, not for normal standards. So the situation now is a little bit temporary and transitional one. So in the future amendment, yes, the requirements, there will be a reference to harmonized standards covering the essential requirements of the AI Act. Just one additional point is just to inform the participants if some of them will work on those future or just European harmonized standards for artificial intelligence. This is one of the sectors that will not be covered by the HAS consultant system. So in any case, it will be there will be another system of assessment compliance by the relevant European Commission services. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Federico, for this clarification. And it's true that you are right. You are definitely right. There was in May before the Artificial Intelligence Act was approved, and then yeah. Now that was the reason. Thank you for this clarification. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Uwe, let me see. No, sorry. Niels, manufacturers often use harmonized standards for the presumption of conformity, while at the same time having to address the state of the art. That's fine. In order to assess whether or not negative assessments of a harmonized standard is relevant to the concerned product, it would be beneficial to know why a harmonized standard has received a negative assessment. Is it possible that the results of the assessment of the HAS can be made public? Well, one thing, let me tell you. Well, first of all, the manufacturers, of course, often use the harmonized standard for presumption of conformity, but of course you are fully responsible for the compliance of the product. Each product sometimes can differ to another product from another manufacturer, and you are using the harmonized standards, but at the same time you address the state of the art if this is not totally, let's say, or if you consider that there are other additional elements that can give more compliance elements to your product. That's fine. But then the question about your question is that it is good to know if a standard had a negative assessment and the reasons why they had a negative assessment. Well, the fact that the standard had a negative assessment does not necessarily mean that the European Commission will cite it or not in the official journal. So the European Commission is making its assessment the same way that CEN or CENELEC or ETSI are doing their assessment. And in parallel, this assessment is done according to the Regulation 1025, but the Commission is the one deciding to cite or not in the official journal. So this has nothing to do with the harmonized consultant. But if you say it would be beneficial to know why a harmonized consultant received the negative assessment, this information is relevant for the technical committee during the drafting of the standard. But after the standard has been published and after the standard has been cited in the official journal, the assessment of the consultant is completely irrelevant here because it has been already cited in the official journal. So what I want to say here in this question is that one thing is that the technical committee has to know the reasons why the consultant considered that the standard was not compliant. Of course, the technical committee has to know because the technical committee is the one to amend or revise or even ignore the reasons given by the HAS consultant for the assessment, for the negative assessment. But making public, it's another question. Okay, making public, if you say you are going to publish on the internet the assessment of HAS consultant that made the assessment of the standard 1, 2, 3, I don't see the reason. I mean, because in reality, the assessment of the consultant is during the drafting of the standard, and the citation is after the publication of the standard, if the Commission considers that the standard is aligned with the requirements and the requirements, with the essential requirements and the requirements set up in the mandate or in the standardization request. So I hope my answer convinced you. Frankly speaking, I think publicly availability of the HAS consultant assessment has nothing to do in this case with the state of the art or with the once the standard is published. It's the HAS assessment, the HAS consultant assessment is just a photo in a particular moment of a particular draft, and the standard that is published is a completely different document. So it may be even irrelevant for the user of the standard. I hope I answered the question, and I don't know if someone in CCMC wants to say something.
I see that Federico also has his also has his hand raised. Federico, I think, by the way, that you should now be able to start your video. You have the rights to do so in case you'd like to do.
Yes, now it works. Perfect. No, just to confirm what Paco says. First of all, the assessment of us consultants are not binding on the Commission. It's just an advice, a support they give to the Commission services, which is also shared to the TCs to make them improve the standards. But the Commission is not bound. It can even disregard completely or partially the comments of the HAS consultant. The final decision on whether if an adopted standard ends in the list of the official journal or not is done by the Commission. Of course, we look into the assessments, but when we decide not to cite, we send a rejection letter to CEN, CENELEC, ETSI, depending which entity it is, which prepare the standards. We provide our own arguments, not the arguments of the consultant. They might well coincide in many cases or in some parts, but in the end, it's the Commission which takes the final responsibility and the Commission which decides on which grounds. So making publicly available assessment done as an internal support from the HAS consultant to the Commission services makes no sense. It's no practical value, also because these are done on draft standards, not on the final ones. The final ones are assessed by the Commission services. We do, of course, provide the information to CEN or CENELEC when we reject the standard, and CENELEC is, of course, free to share it with the relevant stakeholders if they wish, with the TCs, with the industrial stakeholders. It's no secret there. But in principle, the decision is made by the Commission, not by the consultant. So I hope this clarifies a little bit the context and the role that the HAS consultant play in the system.
Thank you, Federico, for this clarification. Let's go to the next question. which is an interesting one as well. Everything that is related to compliance and the legal effect, of course, it's something that I'm just a consultant, so I will always invite the Commission to intervene in case I give the wrong answer. So don't other not essential requirements provide legal effect in the sense of describing state of technology and therefore need to be considered to avoid liability issues or liability? Well, one thing is that compliance with the directive or the regulation is of course based on all the requirements of the directive or the regulation. So to comply with the directive or the regulation, you have to comply with all the requirements of the directive and the regulation. That's one thing, and I agree with you. I mean, to avoid liability issues, you have to consider all the requirements of the directive or the regulation. But if we are referring to presumption of conformity, the presumption of conformity is conferred against the or considering the essential requirements, essential health and safety requirements, essential. So, however, the directive or regulation refers to it, that are normally identified in an annex, in an annex of the regulation or directive. Normally, yes. It could, I must confess I didn't read all the directives or regulations, but in principle, this is my answer I would give to you. So one thing is the liability, compliance with the legislation, but compliance with the legislation is a separate legal figure than what we call the presumption of conformity. And here again, Federico, you're invited to just say, Paco, shut up, you don't know. But this is my interpretation of the question and the answer I would give to this question. And if I see that there is no reaction from anybody, unless because I do not see the list. No, apparently Federico, no, didn't react. So let's go to the next one.
That's one for CCMC, I think, from Frans Nielsen. Will CCMC provide accept draft?
Okay.
Yes, indeed. I will take it. This one for the Annex Z template. So the question from Frans Nielsen asking, will CCMC provide Annex Z draft, which has all the essential health and safety requirements listed? Then the TC work group can simply add content to the Annex Z to the essential safe and healthy requirements that are covered. So this is sector dependent, and depending on the sector you're working in, you can have a different Annex Z templates. So for this, I will invite you to contact your CCMC project manager and check with her or him if the Annex Z you're using for your sector needs to be updated. But by default, today we have a generic Annex Z template, and there are sector specific, for example, machinery, health, or different type of Annex Z. So for this, I will invite you to contact your CCMC project manager to check if your sector-specific Annex Z needs an update or not. Thank you.
If I may, of course, has nothing to do with what Mauro has said, but let me. It's not that I want to defend CCMC here. You could, I mean, someone could say in the question, yeah, but why didn't CCMC? Well, in fact, this seminar that we have been doing now on the Annex Z, it has been organized jointly by the European Commission, CENELEC, and the contractor EY that is managing the HAS consultant project, the HAS consultants project, because we consider that there was a need to establish guidance and good do's and don'ts, and so it's the first time that we are putting in a paper, let's say, this guidance on Annex ZA and Annex ZZ. So ZZ for CENELEC, ZA for CEN. So in fact, this means that CEN and CENELEC have drafted their own guidance for some sectors, okay? But this is the first time we have in writing, let's say, a set of recommendations specifically for the Annex Z. So this is something just I wanted to add. It has nothing to do with the explanation given by CCMC, but the objective of this seminar was really to give recommendations, do's and don'ts, to try to avoid problems when drafting a harmonized standard. This is what I just wanted to add. So let's go to the next question. What is the next question?
It's about the construction products regulations.
One second, sorry, because I don't see it.
How should these guidelines be translated into harmonized standards under the construction products regulation? Since there is talk of essential characteristics of construction products related to the basic requirements of construction works, as included in the CPR. If it now says essential requirement is essential characteristics meant or fundamental requirements of construction works.
Okay. Well, yeah, you are right. The general product, the construction products regulation, because now I don't see anything in my screen, that's why I'm hesitating. The construction products regulation has certain particularities, and it may happen that well, some of the recommendations have to be read in a different way for constructions products. Let me try to disconnect and connect again, because I'm just having issues with my screen. I do not see my screen now.
I can come on that. Yeah. So under the CPR anyway, historically the principle for preparing harmonized standards is not the basic work requirements. Is rather the standardization request or the old mandates that identify which characteristics are supposed to be handled in the product standards. So I think this concept of safety requirements doesn't really apply for the CPR. I think that was the sense of the question. So in a way, I think what we can say is that the principle of safety requirement or essential requirements does not really apply for CPR, because the CPR applies to the works, but then of course this is translated into product characteristics which are identified in the standardization request.
It's always good to have Gonzalo with us, because he's the guru of the standardization in the. Sorry, I didn't want to. I hope you take it in the positive way, Gonzalo. But yeah, you know very well the CPR. Well, okay, so let's go then to the following.
Does it make sense to address the other one here on the CPR specifically, which is listed here as Tim Postema, but I think this is from us consultant Bedotti.
Andreas Dors.
Third one here.
Which is the one? Sorry, the one from Andreas Dors.
No, from Tim Postema, because it also relates to the CPR, and we were just discussing the CPR. So it should be clearly on the point that the number of issues presented depend on how are not fully relevant for construction products, neither under the current regulation nor under the provisions settled in the frame of the CPR acquis.
Yes, I can agree on this. Okay. Let me see. Can you provide some explanations about the closed chain of references to other standards? Well, I'm not sure this is the topic here, but we may give in writing an explanation on this. Do you agree, Dan?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. Fernando Machicado, can Annex Z make reference to a normative annex? So can Annex Z make reference to a normative annex containing all the requirements relevant to the essential requirements? Of course, with the relevant granularity, both in the normative annex and its reference in Annex Z. Well, as long as it is, Yeah, it's interesting, this question, because I guess this is because you have a particular experience on a particular topic that requires this. But if the annex is normative, the annex is normative. What I would recommend is that then there is reference to the normative annex in the text of the standard. Okay, but in principle, yes, if you are respecting the granularity, the annex is normative, and you are referring to the annex in the text of the standard. If you have these three conditions, for me, there should be no problem. Yeah. By the way, hello, Fernando. Long time no see. So, Tim, when did they decide that partially covered is acceptable in Annex Z? Where is what is covered and not covered in an essential requirement to be written? Aha. Okay. Well, the question is to the EC. So Federico, maybe you want
to... a question from the Haas consultant Jean-Jacques from the noise sector, if I'm right.
Sorry, can you repeat, Dan?
This is a question from, because it's listed here like from Tim Postema, which is our Haas support team member, but this is in reality a question from Jean-Jacques, I think, from the noise.
Okay.
Noise Haas consultant.
Okay, no, that's fine. I mean, the question in itself, well, this thing on partial compliance, let me go back to the question because now okay, so partially covered is acceptable in Annex Z. Well, there has been not a decision from the Commission. This is a guideline that we have been drafting inside the project. But of course, all these general guidelines, it may happen that there may be some particular issues in a particular sector, which is noise, and maybe there is a reason for your question. This is the only thing I can say. But we will give you the answer in writing, and then we. If you believe that the answer is not satisfactory, of course, as you are one of our colleagues in the HAS team, the HAS consultants team, we will clarify this issue and put it in writing then, so the users of the standard may know, the drafters of the standard that are participating here, or others that may read the questions and answers, may get a clear guidance on that. This is what I would say. I don't know if someone else wants to add something else, or even the Commission to intervene here, but as every sector has its own specificities, and for sure noise has many specificities, we may have a further discussion with you to see which is the reason for your question, and then we may give a clear answer to all the drafters of the standard. Andreas, when an essential health and safety is only partially covered, how do I identify which part of the essential requirement is covered? How do I identify? What I would recommend you, and this is my recommendation, but again, each technical committee can decide whatever they do. As long as you make a clear relation between the essential requirement and the clause of the standard, then there is a box where you have remarks, and then in the remarks you can indicate how far or which parts of the essential requirements are not covered. Okay, so all the necessary information that you consider that has to be put in the remarks part of the table Annex ZA1, this is the place to do it. This is the way I would do it. I don't know if CCMC has a different guidance on this, but I would really use the remarks part in the table. Mauro, is that fine with you?
Yes, on my side it's okay.
Okay, so in any case, we will give the answer in writing, but this is what I would, my first reaction to this question. Aha, Jean-Jacques. Multiple parts standards. Hello, Jean. Just to, okay, when a part other than part one deals with an essential requirement only by reference to part one, okay, I guess also this case is machinery again, multiple parts. When a part other than part one deals with an essential safety requirement only by reference to part one, Should Annex A of this part say that this essential requirement is covered or not covered? No. In this case, I understand that part 1 is referred to in a particular paragraph. And then you say, okay, the provisions of part 1 apply in this section. So I don't know if the multi-part follows the same structure of the standard or if it's just by reference. But in any case, even if it's because the section 234 of the standard corresponds to the 234 of the part 1, in this case, we know that when a requirement is covered by the generic part, then this is indicated in the standard. But it's not the Annex Z. So the question is, should the Annex Z of this part say that the essential requirement is covered? Well, it is covered in part 1, but we cannot make reference to that. So what we would do is to say covered in the section, and the section may make reference to part 1 in this case. I hope this is a good answer, and I don't know if there is any further comment on my answer. But what lays behind this principle is that when the HAS consultant is assessing a particular part or a particular amendment or a particular standard, the consultant is assessing this particular part, this particular assessment, amendment, or this particular standard, not the part 1. The part 1 has been already assessed. Of course, we assess the section or subsection in the context of the part 1 if there is such a reference, okay? Otherwise, the corresponding part is, let's say, sovereign unless it refers in the text of the standard to the part 1 or to another part that is not part 1. Okay, so it all depends on the architecture of the series of standards. But what is important is that it is clear for the user of the standard. I don't know if someone wants to say something on this.
Gonzalo has his hand raised.
Yeah,
Gonzalo?
I think Paco, I'm a little bit aligned with what you said. I think to make maybe things clear. So in principle, when you are harmonizing the content of a document, you are referring to the document itself.
Yes.
I think this is the principle to be followed. Also, what maybe I will highlight is that we need to be careful that there may be ad hoc approaches in certain sectors, and
Yes.
to see if there are specific needs, and that those need to be discussed in the different sectors.
Exactly.
But like you said, the main principle is that, of course, if you are dealing with a standard, the Annex Z needs to refer to that Annex Z itself.
Exactly. And yes, it's good that you also refer to that, because we for example recognized during the speech that the type A, type B, type C in the context of the machinery, for example, is a particular case that we are not ready to give you a 100% answers. And this may also apply to some sectors. It's clear. I agree with you, Gonzalo, completely. Thank you.
Mauro, would you like to comment?
Yes. I would like just to add to this this discussion that sometimes the TCs on the structure of the series, they state, for example, in part 2 that the part 1 applies, and these cases are a bit different because by this stating this, it means that some of the text of part 1 is a copy paste between brackets to the part 2. So at the end, our consultant needs to access the part 1 to know what is the text that is written in the part 2. But it doesn't mean that he's assessing the part 1. He's assessing the part 2, but the part 2 has some copy paste from the part 1. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for this clarification, Mauro. Okay, Graziano, in case an essential requirement is applicable, but not covered by the standard, it is mandatory to list in the Annex Z. Is it mandatory to list it in the Annex ZA, specifying not covered? If an essential requirement is applicable, considering the title, the scope, and the Annex ZA, but it's not covered in the standard, yes, it is mandatory to. Well, it is mandatory to list it in the Annex ZA if the standardization requests is requiring you to list all the essential requirements. Okay. What we have done in this presentation today is to recommend you, highly recommend you to list all the essential requirements. It's not that it's mandatory, because it may happen that the standardization request is not requiring you to list all the essential requirements. The only thing we say is, okay, it could be good for the user of the standard to list all the essential requirements, because we know that this is going to become the rule in the future. So then it is good for the user of the standard to understand that there are essential requirements that are not covered by the standard, or they are not applicable in this case by the standard. And the example I gave you was, for example, the wooden toys. Wooden toys, a requirement on electrical safety, for example, if they have no circuit and they have no electrical part, would not apply in this case. Okay, I hope the answer is satisfactory. Niels, the question regarding the negative assessment is for those cases. So the question regarding the negative assessment, it's a clarification on the previous question, sorry. The question regarding the negative assessment is for those cases where a harmonized standard has received an overall negative assessment and has not been cited in the official journal. I understand the Commission is not bound to the recommendation, however, considering the following. For example, in the case of a negative life cycle assessment, a negative LLCA, if the manufacturer would like to utilize the harmonized standard, which has not been cited in the EU doc. Okay, if the manufacturer, of course, the manufacturer can use the standards, even if they are not cited, but simply that you use them on your own and you don't have presumption of conformity. Then you have to give the burden of proof. You have to demonstrate that you are complying with the requirements. But when you demonstrate, you don't have presumption. You demonstrate. For example, with my accent, you may have presumption. I may have presumption to be Spanish. But if a police stops me in the street and say, show me your documents, then I'm no longer presumed. I will show that it's a Spanish passport or a Spanish ID, and then I'm demonstrating that I'm Spanish. Okay, I hope the example is good enough. What I want to say is that, of course, the manufacturers can use any standard, even those that are not cited in the official journal, but then you have to demonstrate that you comply with the essential requirements of the directive or the regulation. Again, I hope that we are giving you an answer. I hope, and I hope that the answer is satisfactory for you. Laura, is it common that the EU COM rejects a negative assessment from the HAS consultant, or it is very uncommon, or the opposite, that the positive assessment is rejected by the COM? Well, it is not common, but it happens. So we had some cases where a negative, the Commission rejected the negative assessment because they had additional information, or because they spotted. I mean, at the end, we try to give harmonized rules for for the HAS consultants. The HAS consultants have a long experience in assessing standards, but we are human, and anything that is done by a human, of course, we may not spot a particular problem, and this problem is spotted by the Commission, and then, but this is not common. This is not common, and this is not very common, but it is not uncommon. It sometimes happens, so it has happened sometimes, and again, the Commission is not bound by the assessment of the HAS consultant. In fact, you are not bound by the assessment of the HAS consultant. The technical committees can ignore completely the assessment of the HAS consultant. You are the ones responsible for drafting the standard, and you are, let's say, the one to take your own decisions on whether to follow or not the assessment from the HAS consultant. I hope this also gives an answer to this question. Franz Nielsen. So, can we, in the future, write into the notes remarks section of Annex Z what parts of the essential health and safety requirements are not covered if it's only partially covered. Previously, you could only indicate if the essential health and safety requirement was not covered. Well, my understanding is that after the discussions we are having and after the presentation we are giving to you, it is possible. So unless there is any reaction from the Commission services, my interpretation is yes, that any information that can be provided, and again here, please do not put requirements in the remarks. The Annex Z is an informative annex, informative. So if there is any mandatory, no, forget, I didn't say mandatory. If there is any requirement to be followed to apply a particular essential requirement, totally or partially, this has to be done in the corresponding sections, subsections, clauses, subclauses, paragraphs, whichever part of the standard, but not in the Annex Z. But of course, any information we may give. And I see that, yeah, Dan, you have just clicked that I already answered this question. And I see that, so I hope I gave an answer to your question, Franz. I see that Gonzalo is answering in writing. How does the quality check work and what time? Yes, I leave Gonzalo to give an answer to this.
I will just include the reference to the webinars that have been presented on this, so complete information is provided.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Paco, sorry, it's Frédéric speaking. If I may, yeah. I would ask for a clarification. Is it a question about the CCMC quality check, or is it about EY's quality review at the end of the assessment?
Okay. So how does the let's read it. No, that's good, Frederick. That's good. Let's read it in that context that you have introduced. How does the quality review work, and what time does that need? Sometimes the CD phase is too short to get the check. Well, it's not that the CD phase is too short to get the check. Is that the quality? If the question is regarding the quality review, I can tell you, frankly speaking, sometimes appear cases that need a lot of discussion. So it's not that the CD is too short. No, it's that we take too much time. That's another story. So the quality review sometimes take too much time to decide on something. But well, sometimes we prefer to take a little bit more time than risk the fact that we are giving that an assessment could lead to wrong conclusions by the technical committee. But yes, so if I have to explain how does the quality check work, if it's the quality review, the HAS consultant makes the assessment, the assessment is sent to the quality reviewer, the quality reviewer has a set of instructions. Sometimes we check if several HAS consultants are performing different assessments on different aspects, for example, machinery and noise. So we have two consultants. If this has been managed properly in the case of having a consolidated assessment, sometimes it's 2-3 assessments from different assessing different pieces of legislation, like for example machinery ATEX or low voltage EMC or radio, or pressure equipment gas appliances, or pressure equipment single pressure vessels. So sometimes we have several assessments running in parallel. The quality review normally what does is to review the assessment from the consultant and check if all the necessary elements are met, so then we can distribute the assessment to the technical committee. This is how we work. I mean, and again, any process of assessment is made by humans, and yes, sometimes we make mistakes in the sense that, okay, sometimes there are assessments that are not sufficiently clear and need clarification, etc. But of course, the quality review does not overrule the technical criteria of the HAS consultant, because we are not specialized in the different pieces of legislation. We are just doing the quality review assessment. And again, it's not that the CD is too short. No, it's that we take too long, which is also a lesson to learn.
Maybe just to add on that is that we showed at the beginning how long the assessments take. So where you've seen that 75% is completed in 35 days. That's counting from the moment we receive it from CENELEC until we send it back. So the completed assessment report, and that also includes the quality review. So the quality review usually takes only a couple of days. Otherwise, we wouldn't make that percentage.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we're having this seminar today, and also the reason why we like to start putting things in writing, because then we have a clear criteria, and maybe as a consequence we will reduce altogether the time for developing a harmonized standard, including the assessment from the consultant and the quality review. Thank you, Dan, because in fact this is the case. So Colin Pimley, one of my HAS consultants colleagues.
Sorry for interrupting. I see that Frederick has his hand raised.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So yeah, Frederick speaking. So yeah, just to complement what you said, so you talked about EY's quality review, and I will quickly talk about the CCMC quality check, just to be sure that we address the question. I saw that Gonzalo replied and put the link to some webinars we organized. Thanks, Gonzalo. And just quickly to mention that for the CCMC quality check, we check the draft document against the same template as the HAS consultant, so the new common checklist, and we focus on horizontal checks. So we check, for example, if the correct template of the Annex Z has been used. We check the normative references, if they are all active, valid and dated and available, and we check horizontal elements like that. And the CCMC quality check shall be done within 15 working days. And then when we have the quality check finished, we come back to you so that you can update to you the TC, so that the TC, the technical body, can update the draft following the comments from the quality check before going to the assessment request. And you will find all related information about the quality check inside the webinars that Gonzalo put in the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. Can I think move to the next one?
Yes. Thank you so much. And I see that our colleague Colin is referring to his experience. So observation regarding slide 19, which I don't have now in front of me, so I cannot tell you where it was 19, but I have a recurring problem. Maybe it's the one on the granularity. I have a recurring problem where the first assessment, where in a first assessment, Annex Z cites for a particular essential requirement several clauses. So 7.1, 7.2, 7.3 as an example, and 9.5, no? Just to say, okay, four clauses. It happens that there are some problems with clause 7.1 and 7.3. For example, a lack of sufficient technical solutions, I guess, to address these essential requirements. It can also be that it is very difficult to address this issue, so that the next assessment stage, the TC simply deletes the problematic clause from the Annex Z, but not corresponding explanation of the impact on the level of compliance to the essential requirement. Good, Colin, this is a good example. And of course, well, we know that this has happened in the past, so it's yes, we should be really careful that, frankly speaking, the technical committee tries to address all the comments of the consultant in a clear and transparent way. So then the next assessment is able to understand if this was considered or not. I don't know if someone else wants to say something about this, or we leave this as answered, because I see that it's more a comment from Colin. Maybe it's a frustration that he's living, that sometimes he makes comments on a particular clause of the standard, and then simply it is deleted from the Annex Z. But yes, this is the issue we really need to know. Paco, this is not clearly replied to my question. Who is saying that?
I think Jean-Jacques.
But it's difficult to know what it relates to. I suggest that we skip this one.
Okay, and then we will see. But it may perfectly happen that my answer was not clear. So, okay, Andreas, we received different assessments from the consultant about partially covered. We split it in the left column now by paragraphs. We received different assessment from the consultant about the partially covered. We split it in the column now by paragraphs. Okay, as long, if I interpret you right, as long as you have sufficient granularity and you are replying to the comments of the consultant, I think it should be fine. And yes, what does it mean?
I think the question goes back to a series of few questions that have been raised around, partially covered or not. So my understanding is that in some directives, so the Annex Z already foresees the possibility to say if it's covered, not covered. And I think here it's just a new element that we should maybe try to come with guidance to technical bodies, how you deal with this partially covered.
Okay.
Because I think in some cases the consultant could also challenge.
Yes.
If you can actually give presumption of conformity to such a requirement that is only partially covered. So I think this is maybe an area where we may need to come with more
guidance.
Because we have also different approaches in the different sectors.
Yes. I may think now on personal protective equipment that may have a different approach to a sector like, I don't know, machinery, etc. No, but I agree with you, Gonzalo. But in any case, yeah, it's important that at least it's user. Okay. So we are cutting just the presentation. So yeah, this is what I would say about this. So Francisco Luis Arribas is fully agree with Naomi. It is necessary to know to solve several has comments regarding some directives.
I think there was a question about the communicating information to the technical bodies about how certain TCs are solving, the evolution of the compliant assessment. So it's more about communication, and also give examples of positive experiences in the preparation of harmonized standards.
Okay, thank you, Francisco, then for your comment, and thank you, Gonzalo, for clarifying, because I was a little bit lost, because in fact I know Naomi and I didn't see the comment from Naomi before, so I didn't know what was that, because my colleagues from HAS support are filtering the questions in a sense that I have them in a open. So okay, very good, thank you. Tim is sending me Jean-Jacques again about multi-part standards. I had a clear reply from Federico Musso in the chat, not covered. Okay.
I think the understanding from Jean-Jacques is that if you are dealing with a part 2, you don't cover part 1, which is, I think, in line with.
Yes, if it is the case, then I agree also. Yes, definitely. We are saying.
Except if we enter in the case that Mauro gave, if in part 2 you refer to parts of part 1 and they are all covered in the part 2 itself, like Mauro explained, in that case, you are somehow covering the technical requirements of part 1 in a part 2. But yes. I think we have different approaches in different sectors. So again, as we said, on the sector-specific approaches, it's important that people understand how the sector is working with this multiple part standard.
Okay, thank you so much. And I fully agree with the last comment from Jan. Yes, please, further guidance on partially covered per sector would be much appreciated. Definitely. This is something that we are just giving you some initial guidelines on how to address the Annex Z. We believe that if you follow these guidelines, we may escape 95% of the issues with Annex Z, if not 99. But again, I agree with you. Every sector is different, and it may have a need for an additional guidance. So thank you for this comment, Jan. I can only Gonzalo, hands right now.
Sorry, no, it's
it's okay. Okay. So anything else? Because I don't know if we were covering all the questions, or the rest of the questions will be covered in writing, Dan.
We have actually gone through all of them, but of course there may be somewhere we need to sit together, and also with the Commission and CCMC to formulate the final answer. But that's something we will do, and you will also receive. But obviously, that will take some time.
Okay, we have Daniel. It's saying, can you please come back with further guidance on how different sectors handle the multi-part standards issue addressed by Jean-Jacques? Okay, well, there are, I can react on this, but maybe our CCMC colleagues may give additional things or additional information. You may be aware that, okay, some standards, for example, the household appliances famous, well, but this is an electrical example, so I should not give it. But there is let's say there are some architectures of parts of standards that where the requirement is included in a particular part, which could be part 1 or part 2, and then if there are particular requirements for a particular family of products or subfamily of products, then the additional information is given in the other parts. So this means that the part 1 applies unless that the part 2 or the part 3 does not give alternative requirements. That's one way. Then we have systems like machinery, where you have type A, type B, type C, and you can only use for presumption of conformity a particular type of standards or a particular connection of standards, etc. But in this case, I don't know. And then you have other cases. We have even found a series of standards that are not having the same numbering, and not even part 1, part 2, part 3. They are just simply giving essential general requirements in a number, then particular requirements for whatever with a different number. So every sector has its own applications. I don't know, Gonzalo, Frederic, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, thank you, Paco. Yeah, I was about to say it's a very good idea, but it's difficult because indeed it's very sector specific, and even within a sector, depending on the TC, yeah, not everyone is dealing the same way with multi-part standards. So it's difficult to have one guidance document that would cover all the different scenarios.
Yes, I agree. I think the best thing we can do is, I mean, if you understand the principles of why things should be avoided and why things should be followed, but this general principle is not applicable to your sector for any reason, then the technical committee is responsible for taking the decisions. We are only saying, okay, in general, we know that if you do this, you have problems. And if you do that, you don't have problems. This is what we have done today, okay? So the technical committees are the ones drafting the standards. You are the ones that take the decisions. If what we say you consider that is completely useless, then it's useless. But okay, if we may find some guidelines for some particular sectors, because we have identified that there are particular tendencies that are useful to share with the other technical committees, I think we can do so. In particular, when we are having particular trainings for particular directives or sectors. So thank you for this comment. I think it's very relevant. And thank you, Fred, for your clarification. And I agree. I mean, it's virtually impossible. I can tell you, we were preparing this presentation of today, and it was, even for us that we are dealing with assessments every day, difficult to find all the different cases. It's like trying to put a door on the sea, or a gate on the sea. No, so you can put the gate, but the rest of the sea, where is the gate? So okay, maybe it's a bad example, but It's the best example I can have.
I see there's one more question. I suggest that this is the last one we answer.
Okay,
Before-
Silvia, no, Sabio, sorry. Sabio del Bianco, I think it is necessary to identify with the user of the standard, consultant, manufacturer, etc., to identify with the user of the standard. Start with the essential requirements that they are the target they want to meet. Standards that have an annex set that does not clearly explain that the essential requirement is not fully covered should be revised as soon as possible. Yes, I mean, definitely, if it's a standard, if a standard is partially covering an essential requirement, which partially covering could mean that it's only covering one aspect, because there is another standard that is covering another aspect of this essential requirement. Does not necessarily mean that the standard is incomplete. It is incomplete because it's not covering the other aspects. But if the title of the standard, the scope of the standard, and the Annex A gives you the right information, then the persons that are applying the standard know which are the boundaries for the presumption of conformity. So in principle, I agree with you. But if the standard is only partially covering something because it's not fully covering something that should cover, then yes, it has to be revised as soon as possible. So I hope you understand what I meant. So in some standards, some aspects, some are not, some essential requirements are not applicable, then they are not applicable. If they are totally covered, then the standard is fully covering that essential requirement. But sometimes we know standards only cover some aspects. Okay, and in this case, you may have to apply 2, 3, 4 standards to apply all the aspects. But if really it's partially covered because the standard didn't cover fully the essential requirement, I fully agree with you. The standard should be reviewed. Yeah.
Thank you, Paco. So I propose, yeah, Dan, please go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah.
No, I was about to say, so yeah, I propose we close the webinar now. Paco, Dan, any last word you wanted to share with us?
Thank you for all
Yes.
for your participation. I hope it was useful for you. Like I said earlier, we will prepare a question and answer document. This will take a bit of time. We will also share the PowerPoint presentation, so that will be shared to you by CCMC. That can be done soon. We can share it still with CCMC today or tomorrow, so you should receive that soon. And yeah, like I said, I hope it was useful for you. Special thanks, of course, for Paco for all the efforts in answering the questions, and also a special thanks to the Commission and to CCMC for participating today and helping with answering the questions. Thank you all.
Paco, anything?
I wanted to thank also the participants for their first of all for the patience, and secondly for the contributions, which have been very, very useful. Thank you so much to all of you, and of course CCMC for jointly organizing this training, and with a strong participation I see. I'm very glad with the participation in this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paco. So I will close the webinar now. Thanks again to all of you for joining us this morning. At the point in time, we were more than 200 attending the webinar, so that's great. We hope that the information shared today will be useful to you. Don't hesitate to come to us, to CCMC, to your CCMC project manager. Don't hesitate to engage with the HAS consultant when you have received an assessment report. Thank you to Paco, to Dan, to Federico, to Gonzalo for the support as well today, and to Mauro as well for the presentation. As Dan said, the material will be made available on our website, and the Q&A, when they are ready, will be shared as well with you through the website. So thanks again for your attendance. Thanks for your participation. And I wish you all a very nice day. See you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.